The morning of my son's wedding should have been the happiest day of my life. But instead of joy, I felt an ache deep inside my chest, one that no mother ever expects to feel. The sun was already up, streaming through the lace curtains, painting soft golden patterns on the floor. I had spent the entire night ironing his suit, polishing his shoes, making sure every small detail was perfect. It was his big day, after all. My boy was getting married. My only child. My reason for surviving all those hard years. But as I looked at the reflection staring back at me in the mirror, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Tired eyes, streaks of gray in my hair, and a loneliness that clung to my smile, no matter how hard I tried to hide it. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was the thought of letting go. Or maybe it was something else. Something that had been growing quietly between me and Daniel ever since he started seeing her. Her name was Chloe. Sweet girl, polite, always smiling when she came over. But behind that gentle smile, I sensed something distant, like she was there out of duty, not love. I never said it aloud because I didn't want to be that kind of mother, the one who can't let go of her son. Still, the way Daniel's eyes shifted whenever I spoke, the way he sighed when I asked too many questions, it was as if I had become invisible in his new world. He hadn't always been like this. After his father passed away, Daniel was my anchor. We'd survived those years together, clinging to each other when there was nothing else to hold on to. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, sold my wedding ring to pay his tuition when times got hard, and never once complained. Every sacrifice felt worth it, because he always told me, "One day, Mom, I'll make it all up to you." Those words were my fuel, my hope. But somehow, somewhere between the promise and this wedding day, something changed. I stood in the hallway that morning, holding the boutonniere I had bought for him. It wasn't expensive, just white roses and a touch of baby's breath. But I had made it myself, carefully pinned together with trembling hands. I wanted him to wear it, just like his father had worn his on our wedding day. When Daniel finally came downstairs, looking sharp in his navy blue suit, my heart swelled with pride. "Daniel," I said softly, stepping forward, "wait, let me pin this on you." He glanced at the flowers, then at me, and for a split second, I saw the little boy who used to hug me before every exam, promising he'd make me proud. But that moment vanished as quickly as it appeared. He sighed, impatiently checking his watch. "Mom, I told you the planner already has everything ready. I don't want to mess up the outfit." "It's just a flower, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Your father wore one just like it." He looked at me, not with warmth, but with irritation. "Please, Mom, not today. You always make everything about Dad." The words hit me like a slap. I froze, clutching the boutonniere in my hand. I didn't mean..." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "Look, I just don't want any emotional drama, okay? Chloe's family is already particular. Let's just keep things simple. I'll see you at the venue." And with that, he walked out the door, leaving me standing there with the flowers trembling in my fingers. I don't remember how long I stood in that hallway. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound in the house, and each tick felt like a reminder that something precious had slipped away, something I'd never get back. Later that afternoon, as the guests filled the church and the music began, I took a seat in the back. Daniel hadn't reserved me a spot in the front row. That space was for immediate family, apparently. Chloe's parents sat proudly in the front, smiling for photos, waving at friends. No one even looked my way. The ceremony began. The priest spoke about love, unity, respect. I listened, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. When Daniel turned to say his vows, I saw pride in his eyes. Not just love for his bride, but pride in the life he thought he was stepping into. Then came the reception. Laughter, dancing, champagne, everything a mother should be happy for. But every time I tried to approach Daniel, he was surrounded by people, barely sparing me a glance. Until that moment, I was standing near the edge of the dance floor, holding my glass of water, when I heard him say it. He didn't know I was behind him. He was talking to one of his friends, laughing, loud enough for half the table to hear. "She's a burden now," he said, chuckling. "Always calling, always needing something. I mean, I'll take care of her, sure, but I can't let her ruin my life anymore. It's time she learned to stand on her own." My fingers went numb. Aborden. That's what I was now. The woman who raised him, who went hungry so he could eat, who stayed up every night praying for his happiness. A burden. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of everyone. I just turned, quietly walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. The city lights blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. And right there, standing outside the venue where my son was celebrating his new life, I made a silent promise to myself. He wanted to be free of me. Fine. But before the night was over, I would give him, and his new bride, something to remember me by. I stayed outside for a long time, staring at the streetlights and hearing the faint music drift from the ballroom. The laughter that came from inside no longer sounded like joy to me. It sounded hollow, distant, like it belonged to a world that had quietly pushed me out. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Daniel. "Don't leave early, Mom. We'll do family photos soon." Family photos. The irony stung. I wiped my eyes, straightened my dress, and walked back inside, trying to steady the rhythm of my breathing. Nobody noticed I had been gone. I blended into the crowd like a forgotten shadow, a prop in someone else's story. When the photographer finally called for family pictures, Daniel waved me over half-heartedly. "Come on, Mom, over here." I smiled, or at least tried to. Chloe stood beside him, her white gown sparkling under the chandelier, her arm looped through his. I could tell she wasn't comfortable. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Maybe she'd heard what he said earlier. Or maybe she was beginning to see the man behind the charm. The photographer arranged us carefully. Chloe's parents in the center, Daniel beside them, and me slightly to the side, as if I were a distant relative rather than the woman who gave him life. "Perfect," the photographer said. "Now everyone smile." The flash went off, and just like that, the moment was frozen forever, a picture-perfect lie. Later, when dinner was served, I found myself at a small table near the back of the hall. Most of the guests were busy clinking glasses and toasting the couple. I watched Daniel give his speech, confident and charming, thanking everyone for being there, thanking Chloe's family for accepting him as one of their own. He didn't thank me. Not once. He didn't even mention me. The applause that followed his speech echoed through my chest like thunder, and I sat there, forcing myself to smile as the tears burned the back of my eyes. I was invisible again. Then, something inside me shifted. I don't know if it was the humiliation, the exhaustion, or the quiet rage that comes from being taken for granted for too long. But I knew I couldn't just sit there and let him erase me from his life. Not anymore. When the dancing started, I slipped away to the bridal suite, where Chloe's things were kept. I stood there for a long time, surrounded by bouquets, half-empty glasses of champagne, and a table filled with gifts. My hands were trembling, not from anger, but from something deeper, resolve. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small white envelope. Inside it was a folded letter I had written months ago. It was addressed to Chloe. Back when they first got engaged, I had thought she was the one who would bring warmth back into Daniel's life. I had started that letter as a kind gesture, welcoming her to the family, sharing stories of Daniel as a boy. But as time went on, and I saw how his behavior changed, how he treated me differently, how distant he became, I never gave it to her. Until now. I added a second page to that letter before leaving home that morning. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was just honest. I told her everything. How Daniel had lied about paying my bills when I was the one covering his debts. How he sold his father's watch to buy her engagement ring without telling me. How he called me a burden, a nuisance, an obligation he couldn't wait to be rid of. And I ended it with one sentence that I knew would change everything. Before you marry a man, look at how he treats his mother, because one day that's exactly how he'll treat you. I sealed the envelope, placed it neatly on her dressing table beside her bouquet, and left the room quietly. Back downstairs. The music was loud, and the drinks were flowing. Daniel was laughing again, surrounded by friends. When he saw me, he waved vaguely, like he was acknowledging a stranger out of courtesy. That was the last straw. I walked over to him, calm and composed. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady, "I'm leaving." He frowned. "Already? The night's not even over." "I've seen enough," I said softly. "You don't need me here." He hesitated, perhaps sensing something beneath my calmness. "Mom, don't be dramatic. You can't just—" "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, interrupting him. "I wish you both happiness." Then I leaned closer and whispered, "But remember, the truth has a way of finding people, even when they're not looking for it." He looked confused, but I didn't stay long enough to explain. I turned and walked away, the music fading behind me as I stepped into the quiet night once more. The next morning my phone rang. It was early, too early for casual calls. When I answered, the voice on the other end was trembling. "Mrs. Thompson?" It was Chloe. Her tone was shaky, filled with confusion and pain. I found your letter." I didn't say anything. She took a deep breath. "I didn't know any of it. He told me you were living off his money, that he was the one taking care of you. I can't believe he—" Her voice broke. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said gently, "but you deserve to know who you were marrying." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you." When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I just felt the stillness that comes after a storm, the kind that tells you something irreversible has just begun. Later that evening, Daniel called me. His voice was furious. "What did you do?" I said nothing. "She left," he shouted. "She left me, Mom. You ruined everything." I let him scream. I let him curse. And when he finally stopped, his voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me?" And then I said the one thing he never expected to hear. "I didn't do this to you, Daniel. You did this to yourself." The music began, soft and tender, echoing through the hall as the bride made her grand entrance. All eyes turned to her, glowing, graceful, the picture of youth and joy. She walked slowly, her hand tucked into her father's arm, her veil shimmering beneath the golden lights. The guests murmured admiration. Cameras clicked endlessly. I sat still, hands resting on my lap, watching the scene unfold. My son, my only child, stood at the altar, tall, handsome, smiling as if he owned the world. But beneath that smile, I saw something only a mother could. Pride mixed with arrogance, and a heart that no longer carried warmth for me. As she reached him, I noticed how gently he took her hand. He whispered something. She laughed. They looked like a perfect pair. And maybe they were. Except one of them had built their happiness on the ruins of my heart. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love, unity, and respect. His words hit me like soft stones, things my son had once known and then forgotten. Each vow they exchanged reminded me of the promises I had once made to raise him with kindness, to protect him, to give him everything. And I had. But love without gratitude becomes poison. When it was time for the parents to bless the couple, the hall fell silent. I stood slowly, my old legs trembling, though not from weakness, from the weight of years of disappointment. I walked toward them. My son looked uneasy, perhaps afraid I would embarrass him. He had insisted I sit quietly to keep things simple. But I had prepared something far more meaningful. As I reached the altar, I handed a small envelope to the bride. "This is for you, my dear," I said softly. "A gift. Something every new beginning deserves." The crowd smiled. They thought it was something sentimental. The bride thanked me politely, slipping it into her hands, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. My son leaned closer, whispering sharply, "Mom, what are you doing? We talked about this." I smiled, meeting his gaze with calm strength. "I remember, darling. You told me to sit quietly, but I've been silent for too long." His face stiffened. I turned to the bride again. "My dear, before you open that letter, know this. Truth is not a punishment. It's freedom. And I believe every bride deserves to start her life free." The hall buzzed with whispers. The bride hesitated, looking between me and her groom. My son's jaw clenched. "Don't open it," he muttered, trying to keep his composure as the cameras captured everything. But curiosity wins over caution. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved across the page, once, twice, then froze. The color drained from her face. The smile she wore a moment ago vanished. The silence in the hall deepened until even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. What is this?" she whispered. My son's face turned pale. "Mom, what did you do?" I stood tall, my voice steady. "I did what you couldn't, Ethan." I told her the truth. He lunged forward, snatching the letter from her hands, but it was too late. The murmurs had already started. The bride's father, a stern man in a tailored suit, stepped forward. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The bride spoke, her voice shaking. He took money from my father. He said it was for a down payment on a house for us. But," she looked at me, tears welling, "you say here that he sold your home for it, the home you built, the one you were living in." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung, faces turned. I nodded gently. "Yes, he sold it behind my back, forged my signature, and called it his investment in happiness. He told me he needed my savings to start his dream life. I didn't stop him. I wanted to see how far he'd go." The groom's face flushed with rage. "That's not true! She's lying!" he shouted. But I had come prepared. From my small handbag, I pulled a set of papers, legal documents, notarized and stamped. "I thought you might say that," I said calmly. "These are the sale papers, with your name, your bank account, and my forged signature. And this," I held up another document, "is the reversal deed." He blinked, confused. "What?" "I took back what you sold." My voice trembled slightly, but not from fear. "The house, the land, the savings, they're all mine again. I let you believe it was yours, Ethan, because I wanted you to taste what it feels like to take everything and still lose what truly matters: integrity." The room went dead silent. The bride's father looked furious, his eyes burning holes into my son. "You lied to us?" The bride stepped back from him, her hands shaking. "You said your mother gave her blessing that she wanted to help us." He stammered. She's manipulating you. She's always tried to control me." I turned to him, my voice calm but filled with years of quiet sorrow. "Control you? I raised you. I gave you everything you ever asked for. But somewhere along the way, you mistook love for control and greed for freedom." He stood there, trembling, humiliated before everyone he wanted to impress. I could have stopped there, but I didn't. "Do you remember what you called me the other day?" I asked softly. "A burden. You said you couldn't wait to be rid of me, that I was just extra baggage you were forced to carry." The crowd's attention sharpened. The bride looked horrified. I continued, my tone calm but cutting. "You wanted to start your dream life by erasing the woman who made that dream possible. You took my home, my peace, my pride, and now I'm giving you what you wanted: freedom. But freedom without responsibility is nothing but emptiness." He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You can't do this to me." I smiled faintly. "Oh, my dear, I already have." And then, turning to the bride, I said softly, "My dear, you seem like a kind girl. I wish you no harm, but you deserve to know who you're marrying and what you're walking into. The truth may sting, but lies poison everything they touch." She looked down, clutching the letter as tears streamed down her face. The music had stopped long ago. The guests watched in stunned silence, phones recording every moment that would soon become a viral memory. Then, slowly, I walked away. My cane echoed against the marble floor. Each step felt lighter than the one before. As I stepped out of the wedding hall, the cold evening air met my skin like a gentle wave of relief. Behind me, the murmurs grew louder. Confusion, gossip, judgment, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain myself. The chauffeur opened the door of the car that had brought me, but I waved him away. "I'll walk," I said softly. My steps were slow, measured, but steady. The street outside shimmered with fairy lights from the celebration I had just shattered. Yet somehow, those same lights felt more honest now, stripped of illusion. As I walked, flashes of memories played in my mind. My son's first steps, his first words. The nights I stayed awake, sewing his school uniform, patching torn knees, saving coins in a jar so he could go on class trips. The pride I felt at his graduation. The tears when he first called me his inspiration. And then the distance that grew slowly, silently, like a shadow that swallows light. It began with impatience. The sighs when I forgot something. The irritation when I asked too many questions. The dismissive tone when I offered advice. Then came the insults, the blame, the shame. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. You're old-fashioned. You're holding me back." Until one day, I became invisible. He stopped visiting, stopped calling unless he needed money. And when I tried to hold on, he pushed harder. The house, my home, was the last thing I had. And when he took that too, I realized something cruel but true. Sometimes the people you love most teach you the hardest lessons about love itself. I had forgiven him more times than I could count. But forgiveness without change is self-destruction. When I reached my small rented apartment, the one I had moved into after discovering he sold my house, I opened the door and felt a quiet peace. The smell of old wood, the small potted plant on the table, the silence. It all reminded me that peace isn't about luxury. It's about being able to breathe without fear. I poured myself a cup of tea, my hands still trembling from the confrontation. Then my phone buzzed. It was him. "Mom, how could you do that to me?" His voice was raw, angry, broken. "You ruined my wedding." I sipped my tea before answering. "No, Ethan. I didn't ruin it. I revealed it." He growled through the phone. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what they're saying about me now?" "I do," I said quietly. "And maybe now you'll understand how it feels when your own child calls you useless, when he sells your home while you sleep." He paused. "I did it for us. For my future." "No," I said softly. "You did it for yourself. You took from me what wasn't yours to take, and now you're facing what you created." There was silence on the line, heavy and suffocating. Then he snapped, his tone cold again. "You think this makes you strong? You're just bitter. You'll die alone, and no one will even remember you." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I'd rather die alone with peace than live surrounded by lies." He didn't reply. The call ended with a sharp click. For a moment, I stared at the phone, the ache of motherhood rising in my chest. No matter how cruel he had become, he was still my son, the boy who once clung to my hand at the school gate, who cried when I wasn't home on time. That boy was still somewhere inside him, buried beneath layers of greed and pride. And maybe one day he would remember. Days passed. News of the wedding's collapse spread quickly. The bride's family had withdrawn everything. The venue, the gifts, the money. They wanted nothing to do with him. The house deal he had made behind my back was nullified by the reversal deed. My lawyer ensured every penny returned to my account. But he was left with nothing. I didn't rejoice. There was no satisfaction in his downfall. Only silence, the kind that comes after a storm. Then one evening, about a week later, there was a knock on my door. I hesitated before opening it. And there he was, disheveled, exhausted, eyes red as if he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," he whispered. I said nothing. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. He looked around my small apartment, the bare furniture, the simple curtains, the old lamp flickering in the corner. It was a stark contrast to the mansion-like venue he had dreamt of owning. "I have nowhere to go," he said finally, voice trembling. "They all left. Her family, my friends, everyone." I looked at him for a long moment. The mother in me wanted to hold him, to say it was all right, to promise we'd fix it together. But the woman in me, the one who had been humiliated, used and forgotten, knew better. "Sit down," I said quietly. He obeyed, sinking into the chair like a lost child. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly between us. Then I said, "You told me once that I was a burden, that my time was over, and you needed to move on. Do you still believe that?" He lowered his gaze. "No, I was wrong." I nodded slowly. "You were, but you needed to lose everything to understand what truly matters." He looked up, eyes glistening. "Can I stay here? Just until I figure things out?" I took a deep breath. "You can stay, but not as the same man who betrayed his mother. If you're here, you work, you help, you learn humility, because love without respect dies, Ethan. And I can't let that happen again." He nodded, tears spilling down his face. "I'll do anything, Mom. I'm sorry." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his, fragile, trembling, but real. "I forgive you," I said softly. "But you have to forgive yourself by becoming better." He cried silently, shoulders shaking. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I once knew. The arrogance was gone. The pride had shattered. In its place was something fragile. Maybe guilt, maybe understanding. But it was enough. That night, as I lay in bed, listening to the quiet breathing of my son asleep on the couch, I realized something profound. Sometimes, to teach love, you must risk being hated. To rebuild, you must first let something break completely. And that's what I had done. The next morning, the sun filtered through the thin curtains, painting faint stripes of gold across the floor. For the first time in what felt like forever, I woke to a quiet that wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like peace stretching after a long sleep. I heard the faint rustle of movement. Ethan was already awake. I stepped into the small kitchen and found him standing awkwardly near the counter, holding 2 chipped mugs. He glanced up, his eyes swollen but calmer. "I made tea," he murmured, like a child afraid of rejection. "Inolted." "Thank you." We sat across from each other, steam rising between us, carrying the scent of cardamom. It reminded me of mornings years ago, when I'd prepare his lunch before school, and he'd chatter endlessly about his dreams, how he'd buy me a big house, how he'd never let me work again. Those memories used to hurt, but today they felt healed. He finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot, Mom, about everything I did. I don't even know when I became that person. I was so focused on appearances, on what others thought. I thought money would fix everything. I didn't realize I was destroying the only thing that ever truly mattered you." I looked at him, my eyes soft but steady. "It wasn't money that ruined you, Ethan. It was forgetting where you came from. You wanted to build a dream life, but dreams built on lies don't stand long." He lowered his head. "I know. I lost everything, and I deserved it." I sighed and took a sip of tea. "Maybe you did. But life has a strange way of giving second chances, not to erase the past, but to prove we've learned from it." He looked up, tears clinging to his lashes. "Do you think I can fix it?" "Fix me?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, but not overnight. You'll have to start small. Find honest work, earn your way, help people without expecting anything in return. And most importantly, don't forget what brought you here. Let it keep you humble." He nodded slowly, the weight of understanding replacing his former arrogance. The following weeks were quiet but transformative. Ethan found a part-time job at a local construction site. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Every evening, he came home exhausted, yet different, calmer, quieter, more grounded. Sometimes, he'd share stories about people he met, men who worked long hours to feed their families, women who saved every penny for their children's education. Those stories changed him more than any lecture ever could. One evening, as we sat together folding laundry, he said softly, "I didn't realize how hard it was, Mom. You carried all this for me for years, alone, and I never once thanked you." I smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. Just live differently." And he did. Months passed. The wounds between us slowly turned into scars, reminders, but no longer open. he began visiting the old neighborhood, apologizing to those he'd wronged. Even his ex-fiancée, who once despised him, told me she was surprised by his sincerity. Then, one morning, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said, smiling nervously. Inside was a document, the deed to a small house. Not the grand one he once dreamed of, but a cozy, sunlit home in a quiet area. "It's not much," he said quickly, "but it's ours. I saved every bit I could from work. I wanted to give you back what I took." Tears filled my eyes. I traced the paper with trembling fingers. "You didn't have to, Ethan." "I did," he said firmly. "You gave me everything. I took it for granted. I need to make it right." In that moment, the pain of the past dissolved into something beautiful. Not forgiveness, but transformation. My son had finally grown into the man I'd always hoped he would be. Not because he gained wealth or status, but because he learned compassion, humility, and gratitude. We moved into the new house a month later. It wasn't perfect. The roof leaked when it rained, and the garden was wild with weeds. But it was home. Together, we fixed it up. We laughed as we painted the walls, cooked simple meals, and sat on the porch watching sunsets. Sometimes, neighbors would ask about our story, the mother and son who seemed closer than ever despite the past that once tore them apart. I would just smile and say, "We learned that love doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Sometimes love means saying no, so the ones you love can find their way back to themselves." One evening, as we watched the sky darken into shades of gold and violet, Ethan turned to me. "Mom, I used to think success was about money and things. Now I think it's about peace, about earning the right to look at yourself in the mirror without shame." I touched his hand. "That's true success, my son." He smiled, his eyes glistening under the fading light. "I'm glad I lost everything, Mom, because it brought me back to you." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked out at the horizon, the quiet hum of crickets filling the air. Sometimes, words weren't needed. Sometimes, the silence between two people who have finally understood each other speaks louder than any apology ever could. As the last traces of daylight disappeared, I whispered softly, almost to myself, "I lost a house once, Ethan, but I got my home back." He turned to me, confused for a second, then smiled, a real, gentle smile that reached his eyes. And in that moment, I knew everything had come full circle. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons aren't the ones we teach with anger or punishment. They're the ones we teach through truth, painful, raw, but pure. And when truth finally finds its voice, it doesn't destroy. It heals.